Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'll give you guys a few moments to come on in. Welcome, welcome. And as you join, let me know where you're joining me from today. Welcome, guys. So we're having a short live today to talk about a couple topics. Some of these topics we have actually been having quite a bit of inquiries and questions, so we're going to talk about some of them today. All right, so I see folks joining from Jamaica. I see from Canada. Welcome, welcome everyone. Oh, hi Natalie, you're welcome. So Natalie just had her approval for her postgrad work permit, so she is about to start working after completing her program, and congratulations to you. Our team is very excited to have been able to work with you. I think we worked with you on your initial study permit and now for your postgrad work permit, so you are most welcome. All right, guys, so I'm Kay Wilson, regulated immigration consultant, and I'm coming to you live from Canada, so in Saskatchewan, which is where we're based, in Regina, Saskatchewan. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about a couple topics. You would have seen a lot of news lately on some of these, and as I mentioned, we've been getting a number of inquiries on some of these, so we're gonna just dive into them a little bit more than you probably would have seen on the feeds, and then I will touch on some Q&As to close off. As a reminder, you'll find us on Instagram. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, so we're on LinkedIn. So if you follow us on these channels, you'll definitely be able to keep up with all that's happening in Canadian immigration, and you'll find that there are some things that might be on one platform compared to the next. So do follow us, and so you can stay tuned. One thing that you'll see with Canadian immigration, there's always change. So it's one thing that's constant with immigration in general. It's always subject to change, and there are always, updates, program updates or program draws, or there's just always something happening. So there's a lot to keep up with, which is why you also want to make sure that you're working with a trusted immigration partner. I always say that, because you'll find that the process it doesn't happen overnight. It's not a sprint, it's going to be a marathon. You have to be in it for the long haul, and anything can happen in the process, and frankly you can miss things, right? You can miss key information, especially if you have an existing application, and sometimes especially with how the application systems are designed right now, if you miss something, that could be it for you, unfortunately. That's especially if you're in Canada and you have your work permit. It has an end date, it has a validity, so you want to ensure that you are aware of what your options are and you're planning your pathway to PR. As you would have seen some time ago, the government released some statistics, and one of them was that we have over 2.8 million temporary residents in Canada currently. And I will probably do a separate live on that topic, but we have over 2.8 million as it is right now, and we only have so many slots available for PR, right? So you have to make sure that it's one thing to get your study permit and complete your program and get your work permit. And for some, it does not always translate to becoming a permanent resident, unfortunately. I've had a few of those conversations in the last couple of weeks. I've come across a few students who have had to make that difficult decision to go back home after completing their studies and, you know, spending so much time and money. So you want to make sure that your pathway is properly planned out. These days, sometimes even having a year and a half, sometimes it's not enough. Depends on where you are, and you have to be strategic about what you're doing. Okay, so it's always good to make sure that you know what your pathway is, what your plans are, what your options are, so that you can proceed informed. I just came across someone just this past week who they were at the end of their work permit. They had about a week remaining, and as of right now, they are changing their status to a visitor, and you know, some of these people would have been in Canada for years, right? So you have to plan, and it can't be last minute. You have to know what you're about and what your options are, and ensure that you're working towards them, right? But that's not the topic I came to talk about today. I'm just commenting on a comment that I saw just now. So today I am going to touch on some of the recent highlights. So a lot of them are coming from Ontario. So Ontario has been making a number of changes lately, and they're also trying to adjust some of their programs to be more attractive for immigrants. And as you may know, the bulk of people who actually come to Canada, in fact, a large percentage of Canada's population is, you know, in Ontario and Quebec, you know, in that region there. So one of the first one is nurses. So if you work in healthcare, I would say, and I've always said it in the last little bit, nurses, if you're in healthcare generally, like, it's a good time to try to come to Canada. If you're in healthcare, if you're French speaking, or if you have a basic French knowledge that you can improve, it's a good time to come to Canada, because you will be attractive for a lot of the immigration programs. Okay, so somebody's asking where our office is located. We're in Regina, Saskatchewan. So from here we serve clients throughout Canada and overseas. Most of our services are offered virtually, so visit our website, which I will put in the chat later, but it's nccanadaimmigration.com, or if you go on the link in our bio, you'll see some additional information. So Ontario is making some changes to make it easier for nurses, certain categories of nurses with certain NOC, right, within certain NOC categories, to apply for some of their programs. So one of the program is their French-speaking skilled worker program, and then the other one is their Human Capital Priorities program. So with the Human Capital Priorities program, that one is actually one that's aligned with Express Entry. And so they're making changes to the eligibility requirements in these programs to make it easier for nurses to apply and to qualify to come to Ontario. So the current requirement under these two streams is that you must have a bachelor's, master's, or PhD that is issued in Canada, or the equivalent from an overseas institution. So like your foreign education, right? Your education that you completed outside Canada. But generally, for your education that you completed outside Canada to be recognized, you would need to complete an ECA, or Educational Credential Assessment. So that's something that's usually required in order to apply to that program, or those two programs. Now, what Ontario is doing, they are eliminating that requirement for nurses. And it's not for everyone. There are a few NOC codes that would be applicable in this case. So they have, so if you're a registered nurse, which you'll have a NOC of 31301. So registered nurses and registered psychiatric nurses, they have 31300, which is nursing coordinators. They have 31302, and that's nurse practitioners, as well as licensed practical nurses. That's 32101. So if you have experience, or this is your primary occupation, then this is where you would be found to be exempt from meeting these educational requirements. So that's one. So your primary NOC has to be in one of those categories. And then two, you must be registered, right, with the College of Nurses of Ontario. So you must be registered in one of their general, extended, or temporary class categories with that institution. So once you have completed your, so generally when you're coming to Canada as a nurse, one of the first things that you probably will do is to register with there's a federal body, and there's usually a provincial regulator as well. So you want to register, complete the initial registration, and there's usually an assessment that will have to be done for your nursing credential. So you definitely want to start there. That will help you with being able to work in Canada. For immigration, it's a little different. With so you essentially will have two requirements to meet, right? So meet the requirements for immigration purposes, and then also meet the requirements for regulation purposes, for licensing, so to enable you to work in Canada. And for a lot of people, especially like for registered nurses, that might mean having to go through the NCLEX process. So getting your nursing education evaluated, getting your experience evaluated, and then completing an exam. The process and the steps involved will look different for each person and will be dependent on where you are practicing right now, and the number of years of experience that you have accumulated, and so on, right? But like I said, if you work in healthcare generally, like we just had a huge healthcare draw on the 5th of July through Express Entry, and a number of even some clients that we have been invited. Practical nurse, no. So we don't have practical nurses, unfortunately, on this list. The other option would be a licensed practical nurse. So I guess if you are in that category, so it would just be based on, you would have to look at the NOC code, which is 32101, and determine whether what you do in your current occupation, if it falls within in terms of the duties, if they fall within that category, because you will have LPN, you will have like nurses' aides and orderlies, which would be a different NOC code. So sometimes what I've found is you might have the title practical nurse maybe in another country, but it does not equate to the LPN status here in Canada. So it will depend. Okay, so that's one change that Ontario is making, which I think is really great. Then the second one is they have added some additional occupations to another one of their categories. So this one is the employer job offer in-demand skilled stream. So with this in-demand skilled stream, the applicant, of course, is a job offer stream. So the applicant is required to have a job offer with an employer who is based in Ontario, right? So that's at minimum a requirement. And so what the province has done is to expand the list of occupations that might be eligible under this category. And there is actually quite a bit of a long list of occupations that have been added. I won't be able to go through all of them, but there's quite a bit. And the list that they have posted, which will, provide additional occupations that are eligible for the streams. These positions, though, must be located outside the GTA. So it won't be in Toronto or the Greater Toronto area. The positions must be, so the job offer in terms of the location of your employer, they have to be outside the Greater Toronto area. Okay. And you'll know, if you do a quick Google, you'll see what the GTA comprises. You'll see, the city of Toronto. You'll have Peel region, Durham region, and so on. So you will have to see where your job is located and whether you qualify. But they have quite a bit. They have shippers and receivers, production and logistics workers, automotive and heavy duty truck and equipment installers and servicers. They have material handlers. There's quite a bit. A lot of them are in the trades, from what I can see, and like laborers and so on. So that's another initiative by the Ontario government to expand the people who can qualify for some of these opportunities. So good one to look at. And then the next one I'm going to touch on is Alberta. So I don't think I've ever seen a program like this before. So Alberta has or plans, they have put forward preliminary information. So the program is not yet launched, but they plan to launch a law enforcement program. So this is going to be a stream under the Alberta, the AAIP, Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. And it aims to help Alberta achieve their recruitment targets or objectives for police officers, and to help law enforcement agencies within Alberta, right? So there's currently a shortage within the province, and they have sought to use the immigration program to help with meeting those recruitment targets. So I think that's quite the initiative that Alberta is taking. And there are, of course, as with all programs, you'll have eligibility requirements. And this is a provincial program, right? So it's a provincial nominee program. And at the end of, the application process, the successful applicant would be nominated by the province. And then with that nomination, you can move on to applying for permanent residence, right? For you and your family. So you'll have one primary applicant, which is the person that's applying, and then the family, which is spouse and children, their guidelines around that would then be included on the application. So that's how those work. And so the positions that may be eligible will be, you have commissioned and non-commissioned police officers. Like I said, I've not seen a program like this where they were, whether federally or provincially, they're looking for police officers. So this is definitely one of those unique ones. And I believe they allocated, like for the first intake, they allocated about 50 slots for this program to start. So in addition to like the commissioned and non-commissioned police officers, you have police investigators and other investigative occupations. So once the program details are released, I mean, you could see the knocks that are associated with these, right? It would be like most of the police officer knocks. But I think once the program is launched, then we'll have the specific knocks that they are including, because they could exclude some of the knocks associated with police officers. But those are the general ones. So it's really police officers and investigators, essentially. One of the requirements that they'll have for this program is having a job offer. So the applicant will need to have a job offer with a police agency in Alberta, right? That police agency will be a part of the Alberta Association of Police Chiefs. So once the program is launched, then more details will be provided about, you know, how you can apply for position. But you'll find the generally police services will be a part of the municipality, right? So the city, if you look at the city's website, for example, so like City of Alberta, City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, for example, City of Red Deer or Grand Prairie, like look at the cities or the towns in Alberta.
Okay, I found this on the web. For if you look at the website for Calgary, City of Edmonton, for example, City of Red Deer or Grand Prairie, check it out.
All right, so yeah, so as I was saying, if you look at the various cities that are in Alberta, then you could look at their police services. So you'll see the website, you'll see the positions that might be posted there. So that would give you some insight as to what they're looking for and what you can start doing to prep in order to apply, right? As they say that the police association or the police department, so if you're going to the City of Calgary, for example, the police department must be a part of the Alberta Association of Chief of Police Officers, right? So what happens is that for some towns, so maybe if you went to a small town, like you have the town of Olds, you have the town of Innisfail, small towns in Alberta, what might happen is their police services could be managed federally. So maybe they might have RCMP officers who are doing the policing in that town. So they may not have like a police service that's offered through the municipality. So you'll have to watch for that, and that will help you to see whether a position within this particular town or city would be eligible, right? And then another way to look at it might be to just visit the Alberta Association of Chief of Police website, and you'll see the participating the cities that are a part of that. And like I said, police services can be offered, is usually offered locally through the local government, which is the municipality. However, it can also be done through the RCMP, depending on the size of the town or city. All right. So that's one requirement. The other requirement is they must meet express entry requirements. So, of course, that simply tells you that they need to be qualified for express entry. So if this is a program that might sound attractive to you or someone that you know, you want to start prepping for it. And prepping might mean making sure that you meet the requirements for express entry, or you start working towards that. So you'll have documentation that you'll need for express entry. So there are more than one programs that are managed through the express entry system. So you'll have to ensure that, figure out which program in express entry you actually qualify for, and then, you know, work towards ensuring that you have an express entry profile. So that will be some of the steps that you might want to take there. And then from there, apply whenever the program is open, right? And as we do handle both federal and PNP programs, this is definitely something that we also can assist with. But like I said, you definitely want to start with ensuring that there's an existing express entry profile in order to qualify for a program like that. Okay, then finally, the last one is the caregiver program. So we've gotten quite a bit of inquiries about this one as well. I know a lot of you are excited. They're changing the program. So the last two caregiver pilots, so we have two pilots. There is one for caring for children, so it's called the home child caregiver pilot, and then we have one that's a home support worker pilot. So two different pilot programs. One might be looking after children, one might be looking after the elderly and people who are have certain conditions, right? Illnesses. So the two existing pilot programs would have ended last month. And so what the government announced was that they're launching 2 new pilots to replace these old pilots that have ended, with the view of making the program permanent. So it's not yet permanent. They're launching another 2 pilots, but the view is to make it permanent. So there are, of course, requirements, right? And one of the key difference, though, that we've seen with the anticipation of these 2 pilots being launched is that it will allow the applicants to apply for permanent residence, or to get permanent residence upon arrival in Canada. That was what the minister noted, right? And that's a major difference between these 2 new ones that they are launching versus the old ones. With the old ones, you weren't granted permanent residency right away. You would have to get an initial work permit, and then as you accumulate work experience in Canada, then after a period of time, you would be able to apply for permanent residency. With these new pilots, what they're saying is that you will be applying for permanent residence, essentially, right? So, and another change that they have made is to expand the scope of employers. So with the past 2 pilots, your options for employers were a lot more restricted. For most people, that might mean working within a home with a family. And so now they're expanding the employers that would, or the types of employers that caregivers could work for, and also making it easier for them to change employers when they are in Canada, because that has been an issue in the past. So those are some of the changes that they are highlighting for the new pilots once they have launched. But there are some requirements that applicants will have to meet as well. So one of them is they need to have a CLB, or Canadian Language Benchmark, of 4 in their language tests. So which means the applicants applying to this program will need to complete an English language test, right? So that's one. I really don't, well, before I get there, let me tell you the rest of the requirements. So they also need to have the equivalent of Canadian high school. So you'll need to complete high school in your home country, and then with showing Canadian equivalency might mean doing an educational credential assessment, or an ECA, right? That's not yet confirmed, but that was what was required previously. So, and usually that's one of the only ways that you can really show that it's equivalent to Canadian completed studies. So for a lot of you, I know a lot of you are joining, especially like from the Caribbean, for example, high school equivalency for Canada, when you do a WES assessment, that usually means having at least 3 CXC passes. There are no specific subjects and so on, but generally, if you do a WES credential assessment, and to get that Canadian high school, so you'll see secondary school as the equivalency, generally you'll need at least 3 CXC passes. Then recent work experience. So recent work experience that's relevant to caregiving. That would also be another one of the requirements. Recent can be within the last 6 months. It can be that they will ask for at least 6 months experience, or 1 year. Can be any of those 2. They haven't defined that just yet, but that's based on what was required in previous programs, right? So generally you're looking at between 6 months to 1 year of work experience in a same or similar capacity. And then I think one of the most important will be the job offer. So there is a requirement to have a full-time job offer as a caregiver in Canada. Now, this job offer from previous programs, it does not have to be with, like a large care home or with a hospital or something. It can be with an individual. So for example, you may have a friend or a family member in Canada who has children and they need someone to look after their children. Or you could have someone in Canada that has a parent or somebody who is might need care, right? Somebody who's not well, somebody who's sick and needs care, and they may have a family member overseas that they want to come and look after this person. So those are some of the scenarios that may qualify under a program like this. And also if you have, you know, an offer from a care home or anything else like that, that could also qualify as well. But it doesn't always have to be, you know, to that magnitude. It can also be having a relative or friend or somebody in Canada who might want to hire you to help with a child or to help with an elderly person or something like that. So that those are the main requirements for the new caregiver program that will be launched. And I would say just stay tuned for updates for both this and that Alberta program. Those are, you know, we're expected to get additional information on how to apply for those in short order. And we'll definitely provide those information once they are available. All right. And very exciting changes though to the programs for those who might qualify. And I see that there are some questions in the chat. I'll take some quick questions before I wrap up. All right, so I think I missed some of your questions as I was taking questions after, right? So if you want to drop your questions back in the chat, that would be great. So somebody's asking, do I need to apply for a new study permit if I'm changing college now, or else just changing DLI is sufficient? Please, I am confused due to a new tweet by the minister. If you are already in Canada and you're enrolled in your program, so you're actively pursuing your studies and you have an existing study permit and you want to change your DLI, then generally you'll just need to inform IRCC that you plan to or that you're changing DLI. So you would not need a new study permit in most cases. You would just inform IRCC that you are changing schools, because what happens with the DLIs in Canada, they have to do reporting to IRCC. So if you do not inform them of the change in your DLI, your old DLI will mark you as absent and they'll report that you're no longer in that program, right? So it's your responsibility to communicate that to IRCC, and you can do that easily through your IRCC account. So that's how you do that if you're an existing student. Okay. Is there anything happening for accountants / accounting technicians? I mean, there are no specific programs that are targeting, you know, accountants or accounting technicians, at least not anymore, maybe in the past. For those professions or those occupations, I would say you might wanna look at Express Entry as a start. So maybe look if you qualify. Start with Express Entry. We have an online pre-assessment on our website, so nccanadaimmigration.com. You could maybe start with that. But yeah, you wanna look at Express Entry, the Federal Skilled Worker Program or the Federal Skilled Trades Program, or to start. And then there might be a couple of PNPs that may be applicable. It just depends on your specific background. But there are no specific programs that are targeting those occupations. Those programs that I just mentioned would just be general, and so it's open to most occupations. Hello, that's Beauty Bots 876. Hi there. Do you assist clients with getting a work permit? So yes, we do. We do quite a bit of work permit applications. There are different requirements that you have to meet though in order to get a work permit. So it depends on the type of work permit that you're applying for. Whether it is an open work permit or a closed work permit, an employer-specific work permit. In most cases, like with a closed work permit, you'll need a job offer in order to apply. So you can reach out to us. Visit our website, nccanadaimmigration.com. You can also complete the pre-assessment, or you can send us an email, admin@nccanadaimmigration.com, or call 306-351-5595. We go from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday. Is it still possible to apply for PR after completing a one-year postgrad certificate program? That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. I am Chenille. Yes, it is still possible, but I can tell you over the last little bit, it has gotten a lot more difficult for some. It will also depend on where you are currently and what programs are there. So for example, are you able to apply under Express Entry? Do you qualify for Express Entry? Are you in the Express Entry pool? Do you have, can you accumulate the 1 year of work experience to apply under the Canadian Experience class? Which province are you located in? Is there a PNP in that province that's catered to international student graduates? Or are you willing to relocate to another province that has a PNP for international student graduates? So it's still possible, but with the number of people that are applying for PR these days and the level of competition, it definitely makes it a lot more competitive. And so it will require you to be very very proactive. So don't wait until you have 3 or 4 months remaining on your work permit. The moment you get your work permit, or the moment you're finishing your program, start looking at your options. So I usually recommend at that time doing a consultation to evaluate what your options are and what you should be doing when you get your work permit, because you want to maximize that 1 year of work permit that you'll get to ensure that you can get to that PR destination that you're trying to get to. So you do need some planning, very, very strategic planning, and you want to do it before or by the time you get your work permit. You want to plan for that. I've been coming across a lot of folks who are doing that consultation when they have 5 months remaining, and sometimes it's just depending on what's going on and what they have done before, it's just not enough. And also, very, very important, when you do get that work permit, the type of job that you do is very important, okay? So you don't want to waste time doing just any job. As someone in Canada with the work permit, you want to be strategic about the type of work that you'll be doing. And that's why I said you want to have this information by the time you finish your program. Don't wait. You don't want to wait until after. You want to have the information before you get your work permit or by the time you get it, so that you can know what your options are and what you're supposed to be doing. Would a teacher be qualified for the new caregiver program? It depends on what you would have done outside of teaching. So if I go back to, for example, the work experience requirement, they have recent relevant work experience, and that will be defined. In a lot of cases, like in previous pilots, they either require direct work experience as a caregiver, or sometimes you may not need to have direct work experience, but maybe like a certificate or something that's related to caregiving, for example. But it will just depend on what the final requirements are for the program. But I think you would at least want to have some sort of direct, at least 6 months to a year of direct work experience would be good, or some sort of training in that area where you have a certificate, so some certification. What are the options for bankers, supervising, and managerial levels? You will have, yeah, you'll have different options. It's not so much the position, it's more about the individual. So it will just depend on your specific background that would make you eligible. In fact, I think we're actually having a webinar. Just check our stories for over the next week or so, and we'll actually have a link on the IG link in bio, so you'll see a link where you can register. We're actually doing a webinar towards the end of this month. We'll be looking at immigration options to Canada, so that might be something that you want to check out, where we go into a little bit more details. But yeah, it's not so much there are some occupations that won't qualify for sure, but it's not so much the occupation, it's more about the individual, your background, your work experience, your education, your age, like, all of those things are a factor. Can you apply for a Bridging Open Work Permit once you have submitted an Express Entry profile? No, you cannot, unfortunately. The Bridging Work Permit will only be applicable once you have received your ITA. So you have received your ITA and submitted your application. So you have to get an ITA, and you also have to submit your application. Usually, when you're submitting the Bridging Open Work Permit, they ask for an AOR, so they want an acknowledgement of receipt of your application. But sometimes I've found you can get away with that, but you have to pass the ITA stage and actually submit your application. So the requirement for Bridging Work Permit is that you have an application for permanent residence that's in process, right? So you would need to be at a further stage. So if you're just in the pool, unfortunately, that's not enough. So you want to maybe look at some other options. And I would caution everyone, I've seen quite a few people who are making refugee applications or claiming refugee status without having any real basis for being a refugee. Be very, very careful with that. I've seen a lot of those lately, and they're not, at the end of the day, the refugee status is not granted. Once you claim refugee status, you really don't have any options. You cannot apply to most economic immigration programs. And if your refugee claim is denied or refused, it will result in an automatic deportation, a removal order. So removal order will be initiated by Canada Border Services Agency, right? And they will enforce that. So they would remove you. So you want to be very careful with that. I've seen a lot of that happening lately. All right, guys, I think I'll take maybe about 2 more questions. My NOC is 21222. I lost my job in January. Can I apply for the Human Capital Stream? The Human Capital Stream is not one that you can apply for directly. It's invitations are sent out through Express Entry. So do you have an Express Entry profile, and where are you located? Would be 2 questions I have. I would have other questions, but we'd have to look at your case in a little bit more detail. Maybe send us an email, admin@nccanadaimmigration.com. I am in Canada working as a seasonal worker, and I want to know how I could stay and study truck driving and get a study permit and also work after. So if you plan to do a truck driving program, you actually don't need a study permit to do that. It's a short-term course. It lasts for like 3 months or so. So you don't need a study permit to do that. You can do that as a visitor. So maybe at the end of your season, if your work permit is expiring, you could transition to a visitor status. And as a visitor, you could do that truck driving program. If you're doing a program that is not truck driving and it's with an academic institution, so a DLI, at that, and it's at least 8 months in duration, then at that time, that's when you would need a study permit. So you might want to figure out there what it is that you want to do. But yeah, send us an email or go to the link in our bio and you can maybe do a consultation. I think you need a consultation for that. Kadeen is asking what's the cost for a study permit. So our rates for study permits will vary. We mostly do what we call full representation for study permits, and this is where we complete the entire study permit application, right? Literally, we do everything for the applicant. So that's for full representation, and we do what we call an application review. But this is where the applicant completes the entire application package, and then we will do an in-depth professional review, and then we'll have a review meeting. So we have those two levels of services. Generally, though, before we get to that stage, you'll do an initial study consultation. So that's where we'll start. And in that consultation, we will provide you with quotes for the study permit based on your case for whatever is happening. So we usually don't provide like a blanket quote for a study permit. We do the initial consultation, and then we would provide you afterwards with a quote for services. Okay, I understand the first step is to do a consultation with you. What happens after that? Also, are there pathways for jobs in hospitality, like hotels, restaurants, or airlines? So yes, so the first step usually is an initial consultation. What happens after that will just depend on what you qualify for. So we'll do the consultation in that we're looking at, your specific case, your profile, and we're looking at the different programs that are available as well in Canada and trying to determine which ones you might be able to apply for. So that's where we'd start, depending on the recommendation in the consultation. So if there's a specific program identified or specific, in most cases for most people it would be more than one, and then depending on which way, we would often recommend which one we think would be best, but we would definitely present more than one option. And then from there, we would outline the requirements for that program. What are the steps that you need to do now? Do you need to do an English test, for example? So any specific assessments that you need to do will be highlighted, and then you'll work on those. And then from there, we can also assist you with the application process. So making the application for whatever it is that we're applying for, right? And so that's what will be highlighted. The timelines involved, which will be also discussed, as well as the fees involved. So all of that, so both our professional fees as well as if there are any immigration processing fees, those are usually discussed in that session as well. So you have like a complete picture. In terms of pathways for hospitality, so like Alberta, they actually launched a program for hospitality occupations. So they actually have one. It's a PNP, provincial nominee program, and it's a newly launched program. They actually did one intake since the program launched. So that might be one that you want to look at. Outside of that, then of course there are general immigration programs as well, right? So it will just depend on your specific background. We've found for, like in the last year, we've worked with quite a few hospitality workers who were actually are here now. Most of them are here working. So most of them would have come under like getting a job. So they were hired by some employers in Canada. So I can say that the job market here is definitely different than what it was about a year ago. There's a lot more competition now. can the DLI be changed if in Canada and have not started at the approved DLI? Kerona, we will have to discuss that. You might have to reach out to us for that. It depends on, I would need some additional information. Can I change a closed work permit to an open work permit? You would have to be eligible for an open work permit. Not everyone would be eligible for an open work permit. All right. I think I've covered most of them. If I have an employer-specific work permit, how can I obtain an open work permit for my partner? Your partner's ability to get an open work permit will depend on the type of job that you do. So we would have to look at what you do and whether, you know, which category that job would fall under. So it would be on that basis that will determine whether your partner can get an open work permit. So just maybe reach out, send an email. Self-employed, certified dressmaker, what can you apply for? Reach out to us. All right, guys, I think I might not be able to take more questions. Yeah, we've gone at least an hour. Send us, so what I'll have you do, send us, if your question wasn't answered, just send an email and our team will get back to you. I probably won't say send a DM because we get a lot of DMs and sometimes it takes a while to respond to them. But the quickest way might be to send an email to admin@nccanadaimmigration.com, or you can give us a call as well, 306-351-5595. And that's a direct call. We don't do WhatsApp calls, unfortunately. And you can call us, like I said, between 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time to 5 p.m. and our team will be available to speak to you. So you can give us a call, or you can send an email, or make an inquiry on our website, complete a pre-assessment form, and then we'll get back to you guys. All right. And I must also say, if you have specific questions, like specific topics, not necessarily questions, but if there are specific topics that you want us to discuss live, let us know. Send a DM. You can send us a DM for that, or put it in the comments to the video, and I'll definitely review them. And I will, I might do some of those in future lives. All right. So thank you so much for joining. And if you're joining on the replay, definitely comment topics that you'd want us to cover, or if you have questions, you can also put them in the chat as well. And we'll get back to you. Take care and have a blessed evening. And I'll catch up with you guys later, maybe next week. We might do another impromptu live. Take care, guys.